Hello, fellow homebrewers. JP here, and I want to introduce to you the brand new Brew Built X1 Conical Series available at More Beer. More Beer sells the highest standard in homebrewing equipment, and the Brew Built Conicals are just that. They're made from mirror-polished 304 stainless steel, and they come with loads of features that you and I have been looking for. They have a full 2-inch bottom dump valve, which will eliminate your clogging issues, while the sturdy base includes 4 reinforced legs, just like those big Pro tanks do. More Beer also carries the Brew Built line of options and add-ons like casters, pressure kits, and even external glycol chillers. So you can find out more about the new Brew Built X1 Conical Unitanks by going over to morebeer.com for detailed videos on the entire line of Brew Built Conicals. You can trust Brew Built with your next fermentation, and you can trust More Beer to find the right conical for you. Brew Built at morebeer.com.
Great beer is about drinkability. Doesn't matter the style.
You guys are like walking beer Wikipedia. That's the first time that you've ever accepted me as a person.
Or you have a fermentation in your gut.
I'm jet propelled at all times.
How many guys do you think that you have the privilege to slap?
Somebody who's never tasted a commercial example, and this is how you know everything about this beer? Please, you don't.
I think that's bullshit.
I think it's bullshit too.
Wow. Are you guys going to arm wrestle?
No. We're going to teabag fight instead.
Yeah. You heard of Junkyard Wars?
Can I get another high five, Beavis?
Now, live from the Brewing Network studios in Northern California, this is the radio program for home brewers, craft brewers, beer lovers, and beer geeks. It's your only source for live beer radio that brings expert brewers together with, well, expert drinkers. This is the radio program with a head on it. This is The Session.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to The Session. We're back here on a Monday night, and we have a good show for you. We have Brendan from Liquid Gravity Brewing, and Brendan has been on the show a couple of times now, and I'm pretty excited to have him back on in this capacity of giving us beer, basically, which is what I just what I really appreciate. Brendan, what's up, man?
How's it going, JP?
Not much. Not much. I'm from Texas right now, buddy. Let me tell you, not much. Yeah, I'm just hanging, man. I'm just chilling. It's one of those things, man, where it's just the default is always like, "Oh, how's it going?" That's what you say to everybody.
Yeah. Of course, and then they respond, and then you respond with the wrong thing, and then you don't know what to do. It's like the handshake fist bump. It's like where do you go?
Where do you go? Yeah, for sure. The hug butt slap. I don't know what to do. But then it's I
always go butt slap, so that's easy.
Yeah, it's always like, but then the response is just usually like it's going, but in your heart you sort of know that everybody's just as miserable as you are, and you're like, yeah. I don't know, man.
Yeah. It's like let's just not do this.
Yeah, yeah. But thanks for joining us, man, and thanks for sending in some beer. I appreciate you sending a ton of beer, and that's good. I have no one to share it with, so I'm going to drink it all myself, and I will use the IPAs as snail bait. And that's
perfect.
I don't know, man. Whatever. I don't normally start with a beer, but I'm going to start with a beer just to sort of loosen everything up because I want to. I'm thirsty. I want to drink a beer. And, there's no reason to torture myself in waiting. I'm an adult. This is my show now. I can do whatever I want.
But yeah, there was a lot of sexual tension before we went live. So we got to, take the edge off here a little bit.
That's true. Yeah. Look, that's one way to do it is to just drink. And that way no one ever feels sexy. I'm opening the Crispy Life Pilsner, my guy. Thank you very much for making a Pilsner. I appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit about this beer, and then we'll get into the usual casual, background stuff, where you're from and your approach to Pilsners and stuff like that. But what's this Pilsner all about?
Yeah, so it's a pretty traditional German-style Pilsner. It is like almost all Weyermann, just their basic Pilsner malt. Mm-hmm. We do put a little bit of carafoam in there. Really, the goal with this beer is to try to dry it out as far as we can. Really low mash temp. Everything we can do to really get this thing lean and crisp. We do have an internal calandria as our boiling mechanism on our kettle.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty good sized calandria, and I think we do get a little more caramelization in that than standard jackets or even a smaller calandria. And so it's really important to me to like really try to dry these out because the beers naturally, all other things equal, will have kind of a rich character to them, which is, I think it's nice. It's just you kind of have to build the rest of the beer around it. But it's a little magnum to bitter. I have my notes, so I'm looking down here. But it's
don't tell us. We don't know, man. I know everything inherently. I'm just really smart.
Yeah, but no, it's a little magnum to bitter. We do some Tetnang at 10 minute and Tet and Saphir in the Whirlpool. And that's about it. It's really, clean fermentation with, we use the Augustiner yeast from BSI.
Really?
And then, the difficulty with these beers to me is to get them clear. That lager yeast can be really stubborn sometimes. And so we just use Biofine Clear on it. And, if I, told you the rate that we used it at, you'd probably think I was crazy.
Well, the assumption there is I know the starting point.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough.
I know what too much is. You could tell me a million hectocubes, and I'd be like,
"Yeah, that's what it was."
That sounds pretty good. Yeah,
a million hectocubes.
That's what I would have done. It's just gone the hectocube route.
But it worked out.
Dude, that thing's clear. Look at that.
There it is.
And I cut my fingernails the other day, so it isn't as disgusting as it usually is. It's great, man. It's great. It's super dry. There is you got to have a little sweetness there too, but it is mostly very dry. That bitterness comes through, but it's not too aggressive. And you do have some more deeper mouthfeel to it. You do have a little more, flavor. It doesn't taste just like, oh, here's a light Pilsner. You know what I mean? Like all one grain, right?
Yeah, and I think our kettle really contributes to that. That little light caramelization is a really, in my opinion, it's a really nice addition. Again, you just have to kind of be aware of it when you're building recipes. And
what did you say the recipe was? The malt bill?
We're at 94% or 93.5% Pils and 5.2% Carafoam, and then we put a little acid malt in there, 1.3% for pH adjustment, and then calcium chloride. I guess my dirty little secret, if I had to have one on this, would be that we do throw a little bit of amylase enzyme in the mash
to dry it out a little more.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and so we just keep it in during the mash, and then go through lauter, and it's denatured in the boil, so it doesn't take it anywhere near like a dry or like a brute would if you were to add it in the fermenter. I mean, I think this beer gets down to probably 1.4 or so.
Okay.
Yeah, nice and dry, but not
So you're cheating. Crazy. Yeah, no, you're cheating. That's fine. I get it.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, wouldn't you? If you played baseball in the late 90s, man, you'd be hitting home runs too.
Right, exactly. Just goose the steroids into my veins directly. First of all, give me your thoughts on the disappearance of the Brute IPA fad. Are you happy about it, or are you disappointed at it?
I don't know that I feel strongly one way or the other. I think, I think it was to me, it was like the answer to hazy, right? As hazies were kind of really going off the deep end, and they were getting sweeter and fuller and, no bitterness at all. There's this kind of like, well, let's snap things back a little bit. And so I think it was an attempt to kind of, answer the strike across the brow of hazy IPA. Yeah. And I think there were some really cool things about it. You're talking about, I think it was mismarketed. I think if they had kind of billed it as a low calorie IPA, you're talking about potentially a 7% beer that's got a ton of hop flavor and a ton of hop aroma. That's like, I don't know, 150 calories, right? Or 125 calories. And so I think if they had marketed that way, people would have approached it differently. But, in my mind, when I kind of first had my first attempt at it, it was not as good as a regular West Coast IPA if I'm just evaluating it on its own merits, you know?
Agreed. Yeah. 100%.
So yeah, I don't know. I think it was cool to see, to see that kind of evolution happen, but I don't I don't really miss them, I wouldn't say.
I never got the appeal of them. For me, that was one of those things where it was an experiment. It was a 100% a brewers only experiment. Like, I tried this out and we could do it, and here other people can do it too, but the general public didn't understand why. You know, it was just
right.
It was like, I don't know, man, putting a spoiler on the Honda Civic. Like, it just doesn't do anything, right?
Because you can.
But you can, and it looks a certain way. Yeah, and like, there you go, right? But it's like, you know, you don't even speed on the freeway. So you're not taking corners in your neighborhood where you need a spoiler. And even then, it needs to be rear. Anyway, and yeah, so I think that's why it was sort of like a solution looking for a problem. But not even that. It was just more of like, oh, we could do this. That was cool. That was a fun moment in time. But you know, I think you're right. If they like, there's a marketing board for
there is
I think if you market it as like a low calorie IPA, that might not be a bad way to go.
Yeah, it's funny you bring it up, because we actually, when we launched our brewery, one of the first 5 beers that we made used the enzyme, and we put it in the fermenter, and we took it all the way to 0. But we didn't do it on an IPA. We were looking at, you know, what kind of beer style really might benefit from that, right? Mm-hmm. Where you're not just taking the enzyme and drying it all the way out, and, you know, just making a what's in my mind the best style of beer, which is like a West Coast IPA. But perfect West Coast IPA to me is like, doesn't need an adjustment. And so you were adjusting a beer that, you know, to me, I think was already, that didn't need help.
I see. Right.
And believe me, not that a German Pilsner needs help, but I always it's why we put our little bit of enzyme in the mash. To me, a German Pilsner could always go a little bit drier. Like, I could always take it a little bit crisper, and you certainly lose some of that, you know, that nice kind of malt backup on it. But we did make a German Pilsner, which was, I don't really know what to call it other than like a brute Pilsner. But we did put the enzyme in the fermenter and took it all the way to 0, you know, to make this like 5% German Pilsner that, you know, we were it was the answer to seltzer. It was like, if people came in and they were looking for something, you know, really low calorie, or, you know, somebody that just drinks seltzer and doesn't really like beer, it was something that I still would think was cool, that had this, you know, kind of Saphir hop character to it, and clean German lager fermentation. And you still get a fair amount of the malt flavor in it. You know, it definitely leaves it a little hollow on that side. But that was actually like one of the first beers that we made. We haven't made it again for what it's worth. But that was
fair enough. But yeah. That's a good point. I like that sort of description of, you're improving on a thing that I don't think you need to improve on. The West Coast IPA. It's like sewing the legs back onto your jorts. It's like, you have the perfect thing. You don't need to make it any better.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And they have the zip off shorts, you know, if you really want to go that route.
Yeah. If you're, but you have to be divorced, over 50, and have a Weber grill. Like, those are the 3.
That comes with your Weber grill if you're divorced and over 50.
Does, man. See, we should open a marketing company and just target these companies. Like, we got packages. Okay, Weber, let's go. We got jorts or whatever they are. I wonder if like a brute hazy IPA.
Yeah, and I think I'm pretty sure that's kind of what Firestone did with their Flyjack. And I've heard. I don't know. Again, it's like
weird.
The whole thing about a hazy IPA, the positive qualities about it, right, are that the texture is sort of silky and viscous, and it has this kind of rich character to it. And then you're going to shallow it out with an enzyme. You know, I don't know. You're kind of pulling in 2 opposite directions there.
For sure. You're drawing and quartering the beer industry, and that's perfect. I like this beer, man. So let's talk about the internal calandria for a second. That's the thing I've always heard of as like a China hat. That was the first thing is that what it was? Where it's like a diffuser, I guess, at the 45-degree angle or whatever the angle is, where the wort in the bottom in the kettle comes up through and just like sprayed out in the kettle.
In theory, yeah.
Okay.
If they work correctly, that's what happens.
Oh, yours doesn't work correctly.
No, it doesn't quite do that.
Damn, man. There's a pill you could take, and that'll.
Yeah. So it's a big drum, and it's piped with steam, and there's all these tubes that go through the drum. They go all the way through. Okay. And in theory, if you have the steam to enough steam to supply it, it draws wort under the calandria up through the perk tubes, and then spreads it out on the hat, and you get this really nice mechanical action on your boil.
Okay.
So when we came and looked at this place, and I'm kind of going through the equipment, and I look in the boil kettle, and it's sort of just simmering, and it's definitely rolling, right? Like, I mean, you're getting good convection, and it's turning, but it's not going anywhere near the hat. And so
good.
Yeah. So and then after tasting the beers, I'm kind of just going, okay, I think what's happening is that it's spending a lot of time in those tubes as the wort comes up. It's not really like shooting up, like rocket firing up and then spreading out the way that those are designed. It's sort of simmering up and then rolling out. And like I said, I think it's a character that is, that's really, really, really nice. There's really almost no way to mimic that. So it's a really nice addition kind of into the complexity. The rest of the beer just has to be built around it.
So your calandria doesn't work the way that you think it was designed, but the flavor it gives is still pleasant, and you don't want to quote fix it.
I mean, the move for us in the next year or so will be to try to get a new brew house.
Okay. So why waste the time?
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds. I mean, the bottom dish leaks. I could spend 20 minutes on sort of the issues that it's a 10-year-old brew house. We bought it just about a year ago, but it had been ridden pretty hard for the time that they had it, and as we look forward, we kind of looked at everything that existed, and I said, okay, let's get in here and let's kind of just get started and get to a point where we hopefully can stop losing money. And then we'll start to address some of the major issues once we can. Yeah. And I think one of the first ones that, we're going to look at, just not just because of the boiling. I mean, that's like I said, I think I really, I enjoy the flavor that comes off it. You can kind of work around it, just consider it when you build your recipes. But it's definitely one of the things that, we'll look at first to fix, quote unquote.
Okay. Got it. So let's talk a little bit, man, about your background. Now that I've had half of this beer already, how did you get involved in the beer industry? Were you home brewing beforehand? I know we've sort of probably been over this before, but it bears repeating.
Yeah. I started as a home brewer for sure. I was going to school at the time, and in college you kind of have these really dense periods of time where you work really hard and then a lot of time kind of off. And so in those times I found home brewing and just dove deep down the rabbit hole kind of immediately, and started with extract. I think my first batch was an extract batch, and it was just absolutely terrible. Oh God, it was so bad.
What was your first batch?
Oh, my first batch was just awful.
What was it? What style was it?
It was an IPA. It was a Stone Ruination clone.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. But I had read I read John Palmer's book front to back, and
God.
I know that was my
that's a weighty tome, man, because Palmer knows too much about a lot of stuff, and he'll share it with you.
No, it was just I didn't quite understand yet, right? Like
that's what I mean.
Yeah. I mean,
it's
totally
hard. It's tough. It's a lot. That's your entry point. That's. I mean, you have to be. I don't know. In my opinion, you have to be kind of sharp to get to go to John Palmer's How to Brew as your first entry point. Like, okay,
yeah, and
all right.
I mean, but the information. I mean, still to this day, like when we train brewers who are just getting started or aren't familiar with the process, that's always where I start with them. And I will kind of go through and maybe outline some sections like, hey, don't look at the rest of this stuff, but look at this, and this. And it's more about learning the language than it is anything else, because it is learning brewing is like, it's almost like learning a foreign language. The terms and the names for the equipment, they're all foreign. And the first kind of base thing you have to do is kind of get that get that knowledge, get that the lingo. And so what I would do is I would read it, and then anytime I'd come across a word I didn't know, I would just look that word up. And it was painstaking to read, because it was like every paragraph there would be 4 or 5 words I didn't know. Like, what's a Vorloff, and what's
It's like reading the Train Spotting, the novel. If you ever read that, where it's just like there's a glossary in the back of the book. That's how much the publisher knew that nobody would understand Scottish slang.
Yeah,
but there you go.
And that's what it reads like initially, but by the end of the book, I was not looking up words as much. And, but that was kind of where I got started. I ended up working at the homebrew shop here in town. And that kind of, for me, cemented that sort of, my education, my self-education that I was putting myself through, all the stuff I was reading on my own, and I was seeking out brewing textbooks and really trying to learn the science behind it. And people would come into the homebrew shop and ask questions, and, you would repeat them over and over and over. And that's a really good way to have information stick, is to have to, teach it to someone else, and to be able to do it over and over again really kind of helped cement all that information, which I've all forgotten for the most part now.
Of course.
But
well, now you just outsource it to John Palmer in the written form.
I went from home brewing and graduated and didn't know what I was going to do. But by that time I was, entering local homebrew competitions and winning them. And, I was pretty close kind of with the homebrew circle here locally. And a couple of my friends had jobs at Firestone, and
nice.
Matt was just desperate enough to, grab some crazy home brewer off the streets.
Well, you're taller than him, so
yeah, he was intimidated, I think, more.
That's right.
He knew I'd kick his butt.
Yes, I'll hire you, whatever you want.
Yeah.
We didn't even mention. So where are you? San Luis Obispo?
We're in San Luis Obispo. Yeah.
San Luis Obispo. Okay, all right. So you're a Central Coast boy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Born and raised. Yep.
All right.
But yeah, from Firestone, I went to Central Coast Brewing. I actually worked briefly at Central Coast before Firestone, while I was kind of still graduating. I still didn't really have any idea what I was doing at that point. Firestone is obviously, that was the big piece of not just education, but, learning how to operate commercial equipment. So that was really where I got my training. And then I went back to Central Coast Brewing, and was the head brewer there for about 5 years before we started our place.
Wow. Okay. All right. What did you go to school for?
Marketing.
Marketing. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
See?
So
back to our Weber and Jorts.
It's
full circle, man.
I went back to school when I was 25. My son was born when I was 25. And so I went back to college thinking I'm going to tell this kid to do his homework one day. He's going to be like, well, you didn't.
Yeah.
And so
I feel like that's a good time when you, once you have a newborn, you know what you should do is go back to school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. That's smart, man.
But by the time I had gone back to school, it was like I already kind of was trying to figure out exactly what I was going to do, and found home brewing, pretty early when I went back. And so decided to pick business and marketing so that I could kind of focus on, I had something to focus on. I wanted to at some day open a brewery. And so I could kind of take these business classes with, the focus of potentially one day owning my own brewery.
That's right. I mean, and that's pretty good, man. I mean, look at Stringer Bell, watching The Wire. Like, he was a drug dealer and then took business classes. You want to do the opposite. And that's really what makes you.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, man. And you graduated, supposedly.
I did.
There you go. Good job, man.
I think so.
So you're Central Coast, you're Firestone, you're Central Coast. How do you wind up opening your own place?
So it was funny. I really wasn't looking to do this. I had this idea to just open a beer bar, and it was,
that's
I mean, anybody who's, worked at an actual brewery, it is so much easier just to run a beer bar,
Yeah.
And it's not that much more expensive to buy a keg at wholesale than it is to make it, like it's seriously. And so, and I was going to keep my job. I was never going to be happy if I wasn't brewing beer. I always was going to need that creative outlet. But I wanted to kind of start something, on that I owned. And, maybe find a space that had a little warehouse space next to it. And so once the beer bar was successful, I could put a little, 7-barrel pub in and self distro. And, and so I was just looking for some real estate to do that. And, I in my journey there, I was talking to a friend of mine who told me that the old Tappet Brewing was for sale, which is, where we're at. And, it's a 20-barrel brew house, and it's got 3 80-barrel tanks and 5 40s and a silo. And, it's like, oh God,
that's a big system. First of all, that's a big system just, to be casually thrown out there in a conversation, but that's also a big system to jump into. I think, you're coming from Firestone and Central Coast, so you're used to that, I guess. But
and I had just the one I built at Central Coast was about the same size. So it was a 20-barrel brew house.
Oh, okay.
We put 8 60s in, but it was like my dream system. It was like everything, the forklift pathway in to get the grain out was easy, like catwalk around all the tanks.
That's not your money, man. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Build it, baby.
Exactly.
How was, so first of all, I didn't know you built that system. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit, but coming from a place that you built and you designed to then walking into here to look at, what you potentially could be buying. I feel like it was like, Revenge of the Nerds when they find their frat house. You're like, what's going on, man?
Yeah. Like I said, I could spend an hour going over my frustrations on some of the stuff that was handled during installation here.
Yeah.
But it's stuff you can work around. And I think ultimately if we can get this thing kind of continuing to head in the direction that it's heading, we'll be able to go back and to fix some of the issues. And, this was for, comparison, the place at Central Coast that we built was, it took us 2 years. It was 24 months to get open. And we walked into this building, we got keys in December, and we were open on, January 24th.
Wow.
And that's crazy, right? Like,
yeah. But everything was in place.
Everything was in place.
Yeah. Well, and it's it is how much. I don't even know what my thought process here is, but you can make award-winning beer on any system.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It's just, again, it's those little things. It's like, okay, well, this Calandria, gives a rich caramelized character. So keep your caramel malt out of this. If you have water that's really hard, then you've got to look at, treating your water. And if your water's, it's about tasting the beer and having the palate, the confidence in your palate to know what to do with the beer when you taste it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because for me, I'm like always, to paraphrase a popular song, I'm always trying to chase waterfalls, right? Like, especially with like at home, just to, talk about me for a second, because I don't do that enough. I got a new computer to do streaming because I want to like reduce the amount of computers that I have. And then, but then I got that and then I had audio issues. So I had to try to figure that out, and then eventually I just had to replace my soundboard with a better soundboard. And then I had this. So it's like there's always a thing, and then I go, well, there's this buzz, there's a hiss, there's a thing. I need to figure it out. And I spent days just figuring this thing out. But you sort of have to, because you can't work around it. But I think in brewing, that's one of the industries where you can work around something, especially like on a homebrew level. Everybody listening knows this, where it's like, oh, my pump doesn't work as well as it should, so I have to do this, or my hop bag doesn't, whatever. I don't remember. My whirlpool arm doesn't angle properly, but you have to work around it, and it sort of like relies on your creativity. It's not just recipe formulation, but it's how you manipulate the machinery, how you manipulate the kettles, how you tweak the gas from the ball valve, all that kind of stuff to really that really kind of sets the product apart. So I think it's pretty cool. I don't know.
Yeah. And, you know, I definitely, I enjoy that part of the process, right? Like I am a constant tinkerer. We are, you know, we're always trying new things, and well, let's see what happens if we do this and then change this and then change this. And it's sort of this, you know, people used to ask me all the time, like when I was at CCB, like, oh, what's in that beer, or how do you make that? I'm like, well, which one did you have? You know, like, well,
what was the lot number?
It was this beer. I go, no, but like which one? Because, you know, it could have been this, or we may have changed the water, or, you know, I might've tried something new with the dry hop, and to me, there's a target flavor profile you're looking for. And there's a lot of ways to get there. And, you know, my goal is to try to make better beer every time. You know, even if it's kind of incrementally, like I want to see what little changes do. And if I like them, I'll keep them. And, you know, I don't want the beer to be so different batch to batch that people are going to go, wait, hold on, what'd you do? But if I can get a little more hop aroma, you know, from one way, or get beer a little bit softer that I want softer, or whatever it is, you know, like I love making those little changes and kind of tinkering with stuff. And, you know,
it always blew my mind. And I wonder if it just me or if it was the time or both, because I'm stupid. And I didn't think about this, but when I first started, you know, talking to brewers as a home brewer on this show, I think it was also, you know, 2005. It blew my mind that you guys did these things where you would tweak it. And, you know, and I learned about like, okay, well, you know, plant-based beer now is a trending hashtag. So because some people are dumb, but you know, it's like it's an agricultural product, so you do have to change the amount of malt. But even like hops or percentages of the recipe or whatever to do what you're doing to tweak out the flavor a little bit. I didn't think about it like that. I figured like it was like your barbecue rub where you don't change it, or your whatever it is, right? This is what it is. It's a painting. I'm going to recreate this painting all the time in perpetuity, and that's it. But it sort of blew me away that there are these little shifts, because some people aren't ever really happy with it. Some people are like, well, this is what the customer expects, but there's brewers like you who just go, well, I drink it too, so I want to try to do this thing, or I'm experimenting. Or do you keep changing it because you want to try new things, or do you worry about do you worry about that kind of stuff where people are going to go, wow, this is different than last time? I mean, you said that's not your goal.
I don't worry about it too much.
Yeah.
But I mean, I try to keep the changes small. But I think you hit on something that, you know, it is an agricultural product, and hops change year to year. You know, I think one of the reasons I kind of have always done this is because when we were at Central Coast, when I was at Central Coast, we were small. It started as a really small brewery, and you know, we kind of took what we could get for hops. Now, I think a good illustration of that kind of, you know, target flavor profile and having a lot of ways to get there. And sometimes it's, you know, your mosaic is full of tangerine, and the next year it's more piney. And so you might have to change the hops to get the same flavor profile. When I was at Central Coast, you know, we were lucky enough to get a medal with our pale ale at GABF 3 years in a row. And each 3 of those years we had different dry hops. And, you know, the first year was Mosaic Galaxy, and then we couldn't get Galaxy. So we went Mosaic Citra the next year, just evenly paired. And then the third year we had contracts for Galaxy back. And I'm trying to think of what that third year was, but it was different than either of those two. I think we didn't want to change it so much, so we put a little bit of Galaxy back in, and then still had the Citra. But those beers, each of those 3 years, were different. But I think that, you know, people along the way couldn't tell, because, you know, you can take those hops and sort of identify the character that they're contributing and try to blend them and again get to that kind of target flavor profile.
Yeah. And then, so for a beer like your pale, well, you know what? Let's do this. We've been at it for half an hour. Let me take a break. I'm going to go get 2 beers, probably the Munich Dunkel, I think you sent, and a pale ale. Yeah, I'm going to get those because what I want to talk about is how you make those changes, especially entering a competition like GABF. When you're making changes, do you do test brews, or do you know enough? All this kind of stuff. Anyway, hang on, everybody. It's Brendan with Liquid Gravity Brewing, San Luis Obispo. It's The Session. We'll be right back.
Segmented, demented, fermented. It's the session.
Hey, thanks for hanging around, everybody. It's the session. We're here with Brendan from Liquid Gravity Brewing, St. Louis Obispo. St. Louis Obispo. See, it's that
St.
Texas
Louis
accent,
Obispo.
man. I feel like that's why Texans have that weird accent, because they're just lazy.
That's 100% why.
Yeah. St. Louis Obispo. I got 2 beers. All right, I got Goodnight Munich, which is a dark lager, and then I got Pale from the Crypt. I feel like
actually, I got something cool we can do. Do you have 2 glasses?
I don't.
Okay.
Well, yes. Let me finish this. Let me chug this.
So I literally brought a dump bucket, so you wouldn't make me.
Well, this was supposed to be my dump bucket, so I poured the rest of the Pilsner in here.
It's a good place for it.
Well, because I'm like, look, I got 5 other beers to drink. I'm not going to drink them all, but the Pilsner's, sub 5, and that's my chef kiss moment. So now I have 2 glasses and 16 ounces of beer in me. So now what do I do?
So let's pour both of these, possible.
Okay.
I had this moment the other day where I was, trying the pale ale, making sure that, it was all right. Quality check, QC.
Yeah, quote unquote. Got it.
Quote unquote. Some people call it drinking. It's my job, so I get to call it QC. But I noticed that going back from, and this isn't, a really new concept, but something in those dark beers, I don't know if it's the roasted grain, but something really, really, really makes the hops explode after you smell the dark beer. It's almost like, some coffee beans will sort of neutralize and bring things back. So start with the pale and just smell the pale on its own.
Smelling the pale on its own. Okay.
It's good.
It's
nice
good, man. It's tangerine, like cuties oranges, like the peel of that. Yeah.
But if you go from the dark lager and go back to it, it's so much more explosive. It's crazy.
So smell the dark lager.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, get your nose in that thing, smell a little bit. And something in that dark grain, and then go back to
a little chocolatey, little raspberry.
Mm-hmm. And then go back to the pale. And it's like explosive.
It's, I get what you're saying. It's not explosive to me because, I'm a super taster, and I'll say that forever. So, but what it does is it changes what I smell. So now instead of smelling like a tangerine, like those kind of stuff, it smells like ruby grapefruit.
Interesting.
It completely changes. It's like those like the super fruit, like things where like it changes your palate, where mustard tastes like pudding or whatever. You ever eaten those?
Sure.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah.
Anyway, they're a trip, man. But
I still get more expression out of it when I go to it. I won't disagree with you that it changes though.
Maybe that's what maybe it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that grapefruit sort of is elevated, because I imagine it's not just magically there, but the tangerine smell sort of dominated, but this brings it forward a little more. That is interesting though, how it just,
kind of a cool exercise. But when I am evaluating hoppy beers and I feel like I'm getting sort of aroma fatigue or palate fatigue, I'll use our dark lager or some stout or something with dark grain in it to kind of reset and sort of clear it and go back,
You don't smell your arm like every BJCP judge does, is this?
Oh, it's one of my wife. Shout out to Celeste. It's one of her favorite tricks to show people, and it does work. It kind of helps you. You get back to that kind of baseline of whatever your neutral is. So for you, like disgusting.
That's right.
No, I'm.
Right. Well, I used to do the that arm trick, but I can't anymore because my rose petal lotion throws it off. So I gotta, you know what I mean?
I like your rose petal lotion, JP. Don't change it.
Thanks, man. Well, you bought it for me. All right. So what should we start with? Should we start with the pale? I don't even know, man.
Yeah, let's start with the pale because I think the dark lager can do. It'll be nice if it warms up a little bit, sits out.
All right. So this one is called Pale from the Crypt, and I noticed the IP infringement. You guys have stolen this.
Oh, absolutely.
No, I'm kidding.
No, we haven't.
But it is the EC Comics. Is that what the thing is in the back?
This is a partnership.
Yeah, talk to me about this, because this is 100% one of those things where I would see on the internet and go, fuck those guys, dude. They stole the thing and whatever, but this isn't the case.
Yeah, well, it is actually a cool story. So, the name came to me just, first, and Pale from the Crypt is like, okay, we have a friend of mine who, he's become a friend now, but at the time he was a friend of a friend who does illustrations. And this guy is, incredible. His name's Toby. Shout out to Toby if he's listening. And so the first batch of Pale from the Crypt we made was, just this immaculate, piece of art. I mean, Toby just killed it. And, most of the IP thefts that you see aren't executed very well.
No.
And honestly, I had a conversation with Toby about it. I'm like, look, I'm not trying to like infringe, but you get there's a little bit of wiggle room, if you can consider it a parody, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so anyways, we put the beer out, and the problem was the artwork was so awesome. The label was so good that it got back to EC Comics because somebody who knows them had thought that they had licensed it because it looked pro.
Right.
And so we got an email from the guy who owns EC Comics, who owns the trademarks, and it was a pretty nice email. As far as the tone goes, it wasn't. Hey, stop doing this, or we're coming for your firstborn.
Right.
It was like, hey, we actually think what you're doing is really cool, but that's our stuff. And I'm like, oh, the whole parody explanation. And he's like, yeah, that's cool. Like, that's our stuff. And I'm like, okay, like I get it. But he, at the same time, it wasn't a stop doing this. It was more of a like, we think this is really cool, but let's like, if maybe we could find an agreement where we can work together. And I know it was, and so I went and looked the guy up who had emailed me. Actually, his name's Corey. And I go and look him up because, I figure he's like a lawyer for, EC Comics, some guy in a suit.
Yeah.
And I look him up and he's not a lawyer. In fact, he's I believe the grandson I don't think it's great grandson. I think it's grandson of the guy who, he didn't found it, but he essentially made it what it is, EC Comics.
Okay.
And so him and his mom essentially run the company. And so it's still this family owned deal. The email came directly from him. And, we just we got along as soon as we had our first conversation. And I know it was really important to them that we weren't assholes, I think is probably the best way to put it.
Right.
So
you can't be. It's such a touchy subject, man. It's like, because like this case in point, I know you haven't finished your story, but because you never know where something like this is going to go.
Totally. Yeah. And because he pitched we were trying to figure out how much, this is worth, like we can't pay them what it's worth, right? Because we don't make hardly any money on the cans that we sell at wholesale.
Right. Well, and the Tales from the Crypt brand in and of itself, you mean it's had movies, it was like a 7 or 10 season TV show, and they have the remake, which I hear isn't very good. But that would be impossible to put a price tag on it where a craft brewer could be in reach of it.
There's no way.
No.
Yeah. So, when I kind of told him like, hey man, like this is probably legitimately all we could afford before I just call it something else, Yeah. And he's like, yeah, okay. And he wanted to know, just more about the company and kind of more about our story. And so he actually came down when he was, in the area. He was in Paso and, made a trip to our brewery, and, we kind of all sat and talked and hung out, and we both felt really good about it. And, we started talking about exactly what our partnership was going to look like. And, he had, I was just kind of floored by the fact that they were willing to open up their original comic book cover art to us, to use in these beers.
Wow.
And so, the one that you have there, I don't know if people are watching or just listening, but I'll
sure,
hold it
man.
up. But this is
if you want to see it, go to our YouTube page, because this is where we sort of archive the videos. You can check it out or Google it. I mean, I don't know.
But yeah, this one is issue number 29, the April-May issue from 1952 from Tales from the Crypt. So, these artists who drew these, the cover art for them are just legends. And
so
we're
this artwork
stoked.
is from, I mean, it's been changed obviously to like fit the can, and the guy, instead of having a hand.
We changed the can to fit the art. I mean,
the guy. So on the cover, on the can art, there's a guy like nailing another guy into a coffin, and he has nails in his mouth, but instead of a hammer, he has a can of your beer.
So that was the one thing we changed.
Right. So, but for otherwise, this is the art from the comic book.
Correct. Yeah.
Damn, dude, that's cool.
Yeah, and the one we had, we've had 3 batches of this beer that we've made. The first one, which is the one that my friend Toby designed, the one that got us, I'll say, in trouble. Yeah. And the one that, that was kind of responsible for us being able to discover this relationship. And then the second one was a red label, which is the same as the first one, that had different art. And I forget the exact issue that it was, but it was like, one of the most iconic pieces of art from the Tales of the Crypt comic book series. And we're taking some guidance kind of from their side on which art they think is, they consider really special, because we want this to mean something for them too.
Yeah. Smart. That's really good. That's a very smart way to approach it, because it has to, right. Because whatever you're making up for in the price tag, it has to be nostalgia or a sense of pride, I would imagine too, because you can't put a value on it like that.
Yeah, it's funny. Comic book, we get, as soon as we made this beer, we started getting, people would hit us up on Instagram and Facebook, like from other parts of the world, certainly other parts of the country. And it's funny. A lot of them are like, oh, we don't even care about the beer. Can you just send me cans? I'm like, well, yeah, like, I mean,
no,
yeah, no, yeah.
I mean, maybe, I wonder if you could just put the empty can in your web store and just sell an empty can with shipping.
See, this is our joint marketing program that we got going.
I get 10% of that idea.
Yeah,
for like $5 plus wherever shipping it is or whatever, and there you go, man.
That's actually a pretty good idea.
Nice.
We should do that.
Man.
But yeah, to me, just the style, if we're talking about the beer, pale ale is something that.
Oh yeah, the beer. There's beer. Yeah, that's right.
Well, and that's it's a lot of it is about, to me, this beer is so much more than the beer now. Through the relationships that we've forged and the partnership. I mean, it's a special thing, kind of completely. I also do love the beer though.
It's a good beer. It is really cool. That's funny how like a parody sort of got you into this, and that's the craft beer space, as we sort of push the envelope. I say we, you guys push the envelope for stuff and whatever. It is what it is. There are people who are just explosively blatant about it, and that shit sucks. But and I didn't see the original artwork, so it's fine. But you definitely can do parody, and I think that's funny. But also cheers to EC Comics for not just saying no. I had a thing with the stupid covers that I made for my Disney shit or whatever, and literally called covers. They cover your Mickey Mouse ears. I've seen 2 people now on Etsy selling them, and it's like, okay, so I had to actually reach out to these people and like, look, I actually own a design patent. And so they get into that whole thing, and it's like, well, now maybe we'll work together because you're not being a dickhead and I'm not being a dickhead, and we're sort of like being amicable about it. And it's a different thing because we both had the similar idea, but I just got to it first. But with you, it is sort of an expression of just, do what you can to not rip people off, and then don't be a dickhead if you ever get called out for it. And maybe you can have cool can art like this.
That's right. That's the moral of the story.
The beer's pretty cool too, man.
Yeah, I mean, I love pale ales. To me, this is something, rest in peace, Tasty. But something he and I really shared a love for was these kind of low alcohol, 5.5%, hoppy beers that are hopped like a West Coast IPA, but there's a little more balance in them.
It's a creamy sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Mouthfeel, and then the hops that you chose, which says Strata and Mosaic, sort of match that. It's that it sort of accentuates some of that sweet, And I think doesn't really lead you to believe that it is 5.5%. You know, it's just an easy drinker. It's almost more juicy, quote unquote, than some hazy IPAs that I've had. I think because of that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I'm kind of in the same camp where if I get over 6.5%, you know, I'm keeping crystal malt out of the IPA or keeping it like, you know, very, very, very low. But with these lower alcohol beers, you're missing the alcohol, and alcohol has a very distinct texture and viscosity to it, and it contributes heavily to the mouthfeel of beers. And so if you're missing it on a, you know, 5% beer or something in that range, and, you know, you're hopping this thing like you would a West Coast IPA, it's going to be way out of balance. And so I kind of take that approach where the lower in alcohol I go, you know, in my opinion, the more specialty malt some of these beers can support. So, you know, in our West Coast IPA, we're adding dextrose to dry it out, and we're, you know, almost no crystal malt, or most of them no crystal malt. We do put a little bit in some, but there's really no specialty malt in the IPAs. And then as you get into that 5.5% range, you know, we put a little crystal malt, we put some carafone, put some torrefied wheat. You know, I mean, this is my old homebrew pale ale recipe, really.
Is it really? Damn.
Yeah, it's kind of just, I think that, you know, and again, I kind of am constantly tweaking. The recipe's a little different here than it was when I made it at CCB. It's a little different at CCB than it was when I made it, you know, as a homebrew.
Sure, man.
But you know, that those common philosophies of building that base up on those beers that don't have the alcohol to support it is consistent.
Yeah. Do you sell shirts of these labels?
We do. Well, so we have shirts with the original artwork from my artist or from Toby. And that's the one with the, like, it's got the hand kind of claw coming out of the grave. It says RIP West Coast Pale Ale.
Nice.
And we have shirts that we had printed with that.
Yeah.
It was funny. We were going to roll out this whole thing where, you know, I loved the concept so much. I called Toby and was like, hey man, like I want to do like this series of these where, you know, we'll do 3 panels of art every time we release it. And we'll tell this story over the course of a year, and we'll have this comic book to release at the end. And, you know, we had all this stuff printed. I still have posters and stickers from the first run that was supposed to happen. And, that was when we got the email.
I don't mean not to get too much into the weeds on that, because I mean I feel like we can do half an hour just on this whole thing. But so you can't sell any of that. If you're going to do it, you have to use their art. I get that, and that totally makes sense because you don't want to conflate the two.
Yeah, and it wasn't even that they said we couldn't use the stuff that we had. It's just from a conceptually, it just went a different direction. It's honestly. I love where we're at with it. I think the opportunity to use their artwork from these comic books from the 50s is like, you don't pass that up.
No, it's great. You know? That's why I'm saying, like, I would wear that on T-shirt.
Yeah. Like what we were going to tell a comic book story and, you know, probably have it suck kind of. And
well, you know,
I mean,
comic books kind of suck. I mean, that's just what happens.
Certainly if I had to write it, I'd be like, I don't, you know, but yeah,
guy farts a lot.
Yeah. But it ended up, you know, I'm incredibly stoked to be, you know, to be doing this beer with these guys.
No, that's a cool story, man. And lucky, I think that's pretty cool. Enough about the pale ale. Who gives a shit? I mean, it's not Sierra Nevada, so who cares?
Exactly.
Good Night Munich. Let's talk a little bit about this guy, please.
Yes, that's a Munich Dunkel dark lager. This is one of the early beers we made. It's funny. We don't have a brown ale. We don't have an amber ale. And so there's not anybody buying those in cans or bottles anymore, but you still get a fair amount of those guys like coming in, who, you know, if you don't have something in that kind of territory, then, you know, they don't have anything to drink. It's like they've moved. Seriously.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, I wanted something that would kind of scratch the itch of amber ale guy, brown ale guy, but still was a beer that I found interesting and that I wanted to make.
Okay.
And so to me, that dark lager, I really do love lagers, and I love I don't want to say challenge of making them. But they're a little more nuanced and the process is a little more involved. And so I love that part of it. And, to me, dark lagers are, something that I go to often if I'm out at some shit bar that has, 8 beers on tap and one of them's a Negro Modelo or a Dos Equis Amber. Like that's my jam every time.
Negro Modelo is what I want to be embalmed with. Like it's just such an easy drinker, but there's a little bit of flavor there to sort of satiate that, like, I don't know, whatever, something extra that you're not really drinking an import.
Mm-hmm.
Really
and don't sleep on Dos Equis Amber either, man.
I remember Lowenbrow Dark.
Oh yeah,
let's go back to that. Dude, that shit sucked, but it was different enough to be like, I'm cool. I got Lowenbrow Dark, man. You see that at the Bevmo every once a quarter, and you're like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, Lowy Dark. There's another shitty one. It's
I know Beck's has one, but I don't think I've ever bought that one.
There's one at our pizza place here that's was it Shinerbach?
Shinerbach fucking sucks. I'm going to say that right now. It's off. I've had, and don't give me this like, well, you need to drink it in Texas with boots on, and I've had it in Austin, and it's like syrupy and just sort of like fake.
Still not good.
It's like segmented. You know how some beers, maybe you're like me, Brendan. Maybe you're a super taster. But sometimes like you can taste things and you can just taste the segments in it. And sometimes that works for shit, but sometimes it doesn't. And I think in darker beers, it doesn't really work. But Shinerbach to me is like
disjointed.
Yeah, it's like boop, boop, push the button. And then here's the thing that comes out. It's like watching Star Trek, right? Where it's like, computer, synthesize a shitty Bach beer for me. And then they give you Shinerbach.
That's the result. Yeah. That's funny you bring that up. So I have this moment where I realized that I do occasionally smell in color, which is kind of a weird thing.
Look at you, dude. You're the beautiful mind guy.
No, it was a word I heard it come up in conversations. Like it's called synesthesia.
Mm-hmm, yeah,
and it's not just smelling or tasting. It's the association of any sensory. It can be what you can see the alphabet, and every letter represents different colors. And I swear to God, sometimes like with hops that it kind of like it separates that way in my brain where I do see some colors of the stuff, and it is helpful in being able to like identify things that you're trying to recreate, or because you can. It's not just a word that you're putting to something you're smelling. Right. It's an actual like visual thing. But yeah, so I don't know if I'm a super taster, but I do smell some colors every once in a while.
Like what? Because I agree with you. I do it too every once in a while, and because it's the only descriptor I can think of. So I'm curious what give me an example.
And I don't know if there's like levels of it, because the one that always like struck me, and it was particularly like when Mosaic kind of came out, but I would always get this like purple character, and I can't really I can't describe it in any other words other than the color. Because like I could describe the aromas and flavors I got out of it, and if you want to associate that with the color, but like I would get this like this association in my head when I would get this like what I would call a purple character when I would smell through some of these hoppy beers, and it was like, and it's one of my favorite things, and so as I come across it, I'm just like, oh fuck, this thing's got that purple on it, and so it's that like elusive character that I'm always searching for.
That honestly. Here's another marketing thing for you. That would be a very, very good West Coast IPA name. Got that purple on it. That's like a danky.
And everybody just think it's a weed reference. Yeah.
Right. And it is, but also it's the thing. So it's a little double thing for you. I think that'd be funny as hell, man. And you should pair with a local dispensary.
There you go.
That's all I do. I think of winners. I think of hits. That's me, baby. I'm Phil Spector, but without the gun and abuse. This is a very good. This is a very good beer. It's Munich Dunkel It's called Good Night Munich. It's very roasty, and it sort of rides that line for me between like a medium roast. And this is what I do, right? You think in colors or see colors or whatever you just said. I compare things and I associate things with different things. So like I go, oh, well, to me, it smells like a medium roast African coffee. And I feel the leather boots tightening on me and like my my pants cuffing up and my flannel tucking into my shirt. Like I just feel like an asshole saying that, but I really do. Cause medium roast African coffees sort of have like a blueberry thing, but sometimes they can have like a raspberry lemony thing, and it's this whole deal, right? So I get that out of there, but it alternates between like chocolate with a little bit of raspberry and then the medium roast coffee. So it's like there's basically there's like a berry thing happening with a chocolate undertone that sort of mixes in with the coffee. What's your malt bill on this?
Yeah, I think, as far as what I kind of pick out of this beer, I would totally agree with you. We use it's a Pilsner malt base. So again, Wireman Pils for 57%. This was traditionally these Munich Dunkel would have a really heavy dose of Munich. When we first brewed this beer, it was kind of what malt do we have in house? I got some lager yeast. Let's see what we can do. And so I use a lot of Vienna and other stuff. And so we had more Vienna than Munich. We only had a little bit of Munich when we brewed it the first time. And so I liked it when we brewed it the first time. So we kind of just kept making it that way. But it is 28% Vienna. And I'm not going to round here. So if anybody's tallying this up, it will not be 100%. But there's 8% Munich in it. We do use just a little touch of Crystal Light from Simpsons. That's at 2%. 2.2%. There you go. I give one decimal. 2.2% because I think this part matters, of Carafa 3 Special. And 20 pounds or 1.5% of Midnight Wheat.
Okay. And then the rest.
Pilsner malt was the base. 57%.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's not 100, but that's fine. Whatever. We can figure it out.
Really close.
It's close enough, man.
Really close.
Okay, I think that's good, man. It's funny that the Midnight Wheat for you is like the one that really matters.
Well, no, it doesn't. In fact, if I'm being 100% honest, I don't think it made it into this batch. Again, I pulled the recipe from the first time we brewed it.
Fucking liar, dude.
And I think we had a half a bag of Carafa Special, and I think I called my buddy at Max over at There Does Not Exist, and he's like, I got like 20 pounds of Midnight Wheat, and I punched it in. I'm like, okay, that'll get me the color. I believe we just did one bag of Carafa 3 Special in this, which would have put it about just under 4%, like 3.8% or so.
I mean, yeah, your label says heavy dose of Munich and Vienna malt.
Yeah, I mean, there is. It's 28.8, so it's like 36%. That, to me, that 36% of those two malts is going to give you a nice kind of foundation of that toasty.
Yeah. I think Doc would like this. I know he's not a big Munich fan, but it's not as obvious. For me, it's 5.7% too, which is a little high for me, but I'll accept it.
Yeah, I'm looking back. I'm looking back over my notes. So these are the old labels too. I think this one. Don't tell the TTB.
No, they don't listen.
I think this one's closer to 5.5.
Okay, good. Then I love it. Because you're just like you, 0.2% matters. Okay? I can tell the difference.
Yeah.
It's either I can drive on 5.7 or 5.5, or I can't on 5.7.
That's true.
I forget the two. Anyway, no, it's a very flavorful, full-bodied, rich beer, sub 6, and I feel like it's hard to do. And how much of that do you think is you building for the internal calandria? I want to call it an external calandria, but I feel like that would be very bad to have an external calandria.
Those exist.
Oh shit!
There actually is a boiling mechanism where they run it on the outside of the kettle, and I've never seen one. I've read about them in brewing textbooks, but there is such a thing as an external calandria. Otherwise, you just call it a calandria.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, fair enough. You're right. I mean, that makes sense.
But everybody calls them assless chaps, even though there's no such thing.
Thank you.
Chaps.
Nobody understands that. All chaps are assless. Inherently, that's what they are. They're also internal legless.
Yeah. So I guess, anyways.
So I mean, you've sort of already said, but you build this beer for the caramelization that you get, or the Maillard reactions for you purists out there that you get from it. I mean, do you have to be a little lighter handed on the darker malt so you don't emphasize this?
Yeah. When I talk about that, it's a pretty, it's not a really dominant character. So when I talk about that, I'm talking more about West Coast IPAs, something where that character really, really matters. Like you punch up that caramelization by 10% on a beer like this. I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but you don't have to really be careful what you're doing with it.
Okay.
If you've got a IPA, West Coast IPA, that's, mostly 2-row, and you're trying to have it really be, bright and crisp and lean. And you're like, oh, I'm gonna throw a little bit of caramel malt in there to, you're talking about 1 to 2% caramel malt. And, that kettle caramelization all of a sudden comes into play. I don't think it's as important on a beer like this. I think it's a positive contributor, but I wouldn't say that I build, this recipe around the Calandria on a darker beer. But I'm more careful with it with the West Coast IPAs.
Okay. So yeah, it's like going from like a lilac to a lavender. That's a little bit more subtle, but if you did it with this, it might be going from like an indigo violet to like a fig or an amethyst, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's 100% what I'm saying.
I just killed myself with my own stupid joke. All right, let's take a quick break. It's our last break. I'm going to go get all of the IPAs. No, you have a Pilsner you sent too, didn't you? Or is that it?
We started with that.
That was it, right? So the rest is just IPAs.
It's, I believe it's IPA town after this, my friend.
Yeah. All right. So that's it for the show. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. If you want to follow Brendan. No, I'm going to get the IPAs and we're going to crack those. We're going to get into that because I'm sure there's a lot of stuff we can talk about on there. But yeah, it's a good Munich, man. It's very, very rich and very hearty. Sub 6. Love it. Good stuff.
Yeah. Thank you, man. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Hang on, everybody. It's the session. I almost told you to hang on. Hang on, Brendan. We'll be right back with you from the whatever.
Tell me to hold on.
Yeah. We'll be right back, everybody. Hang tight.
You're tuned into this session.
Because life's too short to listen to crappy radio.
Hey, thanks for sticking around, everybody. We are still here with Brendan. I tried to hang up on him a couple times, but apparently he has. Yeah, he kept calling back. So I'm like, what do you do? Oh, fine. I'll finish the show. It's fine. Liquid Gravity is the brewing company. Brendan is the brewer, owner, social media guy. So if you see anything, weird online, it comes from him.
That's true. That's 100% true.
Okay, so the only thing that we have left to talk about is IPAs.
Your favorite.
Yeah. But before look, I'll tell you what. I'm going to open. Okay, so we'll save the double IPA for last. So I have 2 IPAs to talk about. And we're going to talk about COVID. We're going to talk a little bit about the pandemic because to me that's very interesting and how breweries specifically are, again, I'll use the P word, pivoting and adjusting their distribution philosophy and all that kind of stuff. I think that's very fascinating that y'all are still able to sort of like get it up and running. So which of these 2 beers would be the best to drink while we're talking about that? We got the 2 hop series. Are You Still Down? And then you're apparently standard West Coast.
So yeah, the standard, the regular.
Let's go.
The things that drive me crazy when, my thinking when we named that beer, it's like, let's just name it the brewery, Liquid Gravity IPA. Let's make it our best beer. And it'll kind of be, you know, as we figure stuff out, we'll like integrate those changes and those improvements into this beer. It's going to kind of be, you know, this is always going to be our best foot forward beer. And I'm not saying that it's not, but I can't tell you how many people come up to the bar and they're looking through the beers, like, oh, I'll just get the regular IPA. I'm like, God damn it.
Well, I get that, because it's sort of like, it's not a slam or a knock, but it is like,
just, what do you call it? You know?
What do you call it? Right. It's like, well, it's the regular. So if, like me, if I see the name is the name of the brewery IPA, especially if I'm, you know, half pissed already. Well, I mean, let's be honest, that's not going to ever be me asking for that. But I can understand that from a drunk dickhead, you know, standpoint, where it's like, oh, I'll just take the regular, you know, whatever. It's fine.
Yeah. So it's funny, you know, I think we may do a little rebranding on this where we're actually going to give it a name and call it LG IPA. So it has something that you can call it that's not, you know, the regular IPA.
Yeah.
It has its own name, but it still has, you know, the brand association with, you know, the 2-letter acronym for the brewery.
Yeah.
And I don't have to hear people order the regular IPA anymore.
The LG. Yeah. Or people are going to say the Ligpa.
Yeah.
When
I worked at Firestone, I can't tell you how many times I heard people order a Woolly Jack was one of the good ones.
Yeah, dude.
And for like all the brewer's favorite beer, you know, one of the brewer's favorite beers was the unfiltered DBA, which we affectionately, it's so good.
Yeah.
We affectionately call UDBA. We call it UDBA, but people would come in and order UDBA. And it's like, okay, I mean, whatever.
What are you going to do, man?
You know, but yeah, this is our, you know, I'll call it our flagship.
Okay.
How about that?
Okay.
But yeah, it's this is I would consider it sort of a merging of kind of old school West Coast and new school West Coast. It's got that modern, you know, very, very dry. This beer finishes just above 1 Plato, about 1.2 Plato. Not a lot of specialty malt, corn sugar to dry it out. You know, but we put some Centennial in with this beer along with the Mosaic. And that Centennial to me really provides a foundation that is, you know, kind of I don't want to say a throwback, but is sort of that classic, you know, pine and grapefruit that, you know, doesn't disintegrate as fast. You know, the Mosaics and the Citros and the Galaxies and all these new school hops are great, but they kind of flash like stars and they die off faster. And to me, if you pair them with, you know, one of those more classic hops, and I really love Centennial for that, you get a little more, you know, a little longer legs on it. That it tends to last a little longer, in my opinion. But
interesting.
So yeah, to me, this is, you know, you get kind of the best of both worlds, where you get a little bit of that classic kind of piney grapefruit, but there's still a little bit of that kind of mango, papaya, tropical. The Citra that we have, I think, kicks a little bit of that kind of tangerine, and it is, you know, it does have a nice mouthfeel to it, but it is still very dry. I mean, certainly by the numbers, it finishes very low. But this is, you know, don't think about it too much. This is your drinking beer. This is your drinking
beer. Yeah. Yes. It's my drinking IPA. When you sort of build for old school meets new school, East Coast versus West Coast, I guess, you know, how do you address the hopping? For me, the aroma is West Coast, right? It's a West Coast IPA, but the flavor additions are new school IPAs. Is that, when you're building that, do you get that deep into the weeds about it? Like, do you go, I want to target this for aroma and this for flavor, or did it just sort of come out the wash that way?
No, I think, we want this beer to have that big, you know, kind of new school hop aroma, for sure. You know, I think that just the hop selection that we've chosen, you know, gives a little bit of that kind of classic profile, in both the aroma and the flavor. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that it was like, it has to smell new school and I want it to taste, you know, a little bit classic, or vice versa.
Yeah.
It was more like, you know, I want this thing to really pop in the aroma and have that, you know, unmistakable kind of, and now we're getting into the discussion of, new school West Coast versus, maybe a modern, take on the hazy or clear hazy, or, this could be a 2-hour conversation on its own.
Dave, formerly of Flat Tail, now of New Spring. Excuse me, I also said New School. I guess I'm just stuck in those West Coast rap like thing. He and I have always had discussions about you can make a clear West Coast IPA that tastes like a hazy. So that just part made me laugh, but it sort of is there. I don't want to say the mouthfeel is creamy in any sense of the word, but the hop flavor for me does sort of elongate and sort of last in a coating way that some other IPAs, especially West Coast or New School or whatever you want to call it, are sort of like driving. This is sort of just like a marine layer, just sort of like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And
it's different.
And, by design, and when we get into the 2-hop, we'll see what you think about that. But, a lot of the beers that, even the West Coast beers that we make, have either very little or no bittering addition. Right. And so we're really getting all of our bitterness from that big whirlpool charge. And in the liquid gravity, we do put, let me look up the paperwork here, but it's somewhere.
Here we go. We're looking it up. He doesn't know it, folks. He doesn't know his shit.
Hold on. So there is about a 10 IBU charge up front on this. Not that that's a lot, but I think it distinguishes it from, some of the other new school West Coast beers we make, where we'll leave that out, and it'll be 100% Whirlpool edition. We'll cool down the Whirlpool to get to even minimize the bitterness even further. But this beer, I really did want that to kind of, drive through. I wanted that bitterness to carry through a little bit more than, the sherbet West Coast IPAs that, I like also, but, that's not what this beer was supposed to be.
When you say up front, is that like a boil edition, like a 60-minute edition?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So we do kind of depending on how I'm feeling for the day, we'll do somewhere between like 1 and 2 pounds of Warrior at boil start.
Okay. In a 20 barrel batch?
Yeah. And they typically get,
it doesn't sound like much at all.
Yeah. It's not, we, like I said, we get about 10 to 15 IBUs out of that. And then still on the back end, this thing's getting 21 pounds of hops in the Whirlpool. So it's still definitely Whirlpool driven. But what does distinguish it from some of the other, maybe more modern or more new school beers that we're making, it still has that little bit up front to carry that through a little bit.
Okay. What about yeast on this? What kind of yeast do you use?
We use the Chico strain, the 001, US05, the 1056, however you want to slice it.
Yeah. Do you prop in-house, or are you buying these all the time? I mean, I imagine you're doing a combination. I don't know.
Yeah. So most of the West Coast beers that we're making, we're using US05, which is the dry yeast. It's funny. I remember talking to Matt about this, and I was almost like embarrassed to tell Matt Brindleton. I was almost embarrassed to tell him I was using dry yeast because coming from Firestone, it's like we'd prop all the yeast in house, and I certainly I appreciate that, and we prop yeast for our hazy beers and for our lagers. But I really, really, really like the character of that US05. And it does, on some level, it kind of dummy proofs it a little bit, depending on how many people you have working in the cellar and how many people you're trying to train. It's like, it's the same amount of yeast all the time. It's very predictable. There's a little more variability once you go to harvesting and you want to look at it under a microscope and stain it. What's your viability and your pitch weight? And, it can get a little more complicated. And I enjoy that part of it too. But, the consistency that we're able to get by just being able to measure that yeast with a known amount from the first time and have it not, cost an arm and a leg. I mean, if we were to order a 40 barrel or 80 barrel pitch of liquid yeast from the lab, it would be, thousands of dollars. And so this is a way to, have it consistent. And if I thought that the character suffered from it, I wouldn't use it. I mean, all the GABF medals we won at Central Coast and all those West Coast beers that we had success in competition with were always first gen US-05 on the California on the West Coast side.
Wow. Do you reuse? Do you ever go like deeper generations of that dry yeast, or is it just one and done?
I went and done it. I also dry hop these West Coast beers pretty early. So, like I said, they're getting down to 1.2, 1.3 Plato, sometimes a little bit lower even. And, we're dry hopping them most of the time around 3. And so we're catching them pretty early. And so when we do that first dump before we dry hop, there's very, very little yeast that comes out of it. Okay. So, I'm trying to catch some of that biotransformation and that mechanical action of fermentation to help stir the hops. And I've talked to some other brewers. They're like, well, just pitch it with yeast. I'm like, nah, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. It seems to be working.
Yep. Yeah. There you go, man. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the pandemic. Well, first of all, when did you open? It sounds like you're very, very new.
Yeah.
Like what year was that?
We opened in January of 2020.
Okay, that's what I thought, man. That is not the best time.
Not how you draw it up.
No, for sure. So what about the March? I think is when we hit the lockdown. What are you feeling there? You're 2 months into what is your dream? You've been working at this for years.
Yeah, it was terrifying.
Yeah.
7 weeks in after we opened was the official shutdown.
God.
And honestly, that first shutdown, we had money in the bank to lose, right? We knew we were going to lose money. At least it was there. We didn't plan on losing it that way necessarily.
Right. You thought just a lot of marketing or, missed opportunities for merch.
Yeah. So, but at the same time, it was there at least. Yeah. And so, those couple months or however long that first shutdown lasted was like, okay, at least the money's there, but obviously this can't go on forever. And then as things kind of got a little better, and, we stabilized a little bit. And, one of the things that we did, and this isn't, I don't think, unique to us. I think most breweries in the country did a, I'll use your word, pivot, and moved into cans. We were, we were planning our business model on doing almost all draft. I want to preserve the freshness of our beer, and I want to make sure that when it gets in market, it's stable. And we were certainly going to do cans, but we were going to do them small runs for in-house only, and where we could kind of control it, and where I think beer lasts a little longer in kegs. That was really what we were going to use in distribution. Pandemic hit, and we kind of flipped on a dime and went 100% of our beer was going into cans at one point. And coming back now, I think it helped us because I think it's a better model to have closer to an even split. And so we're doing about 50-50 right now. And we get a ton of people in who have our beer that they buy it in cans at the liquor store in the Valley or up in the Bay Area or down south. And they had no idea who we were. They liked our beer in cans. Now they're coming to our brewery. And
nice.
You don't get that same opportunity on draft at a restaurant or a beer bar.
Yeah, you're more targeted. You're more focused at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, someone sees your name, you're one of 12 beers on the list. They order it, they like it, they don't remember what it was.
Right. And then they're on to the next thing, which is the point of multi-tap beer bars. Yeah, you want to have 20 taps, so you have a variety. That's a really good point, and something I never really thought about before. It's that take-home experience of being in a can.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You drink it, and inherently you look at it on the shelf, and then you're looking at it again as you drink it. Maybe you give one to your friend. Maybe you throw it at him. Maybe you throw it at your kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. Memories like that.
But it is. It's an opportunity to build a relationship with your brand. With the customer. And I think I had underestimated the value of that when we started. And if there's any silver lining that kind of came out of this, it's that I think we ended up in a stronger position, at this point with kind of that even split with draft and cans.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it, man. That's cool. And it's, and I know it's a sensitive subject for a lot of people, and on the one hand, I don't like bringing it up anymore because I'm also just really fucking tired of hearing about it. But on the other hand, I'm really fascinated with how businesses and breweries specifically who, that for years, for recent amount of years, the business model was, over-counter draft sales. You get people in your tap room, and that's where the money flows, and that's how you make it as a craft brewer, especially on a small scale. Not that 20 barrels is small, but you know what I mean. Like for a while, nano breweries you couldn't make any money on a 1 barrel, but maybe you could eke by and whatever. But the pandemic killed all that. The lockdown killed all that. So I'm just always forever fascinated in how people adapt to that.
Yeah, it was a crazy year. Trying to. Yeah. Even like our very first distribution rollout was set for Tuesday, right after the shutdown, the day after the shutdown. Oh, and so we had it was 10 pallets of beer or something that was supposed to get picked up by our distributor.
Wow.
And they called us Monday and canceled. And it was like, okay.
They just canceled. They just said we're not going to take it anymore.
Well, they couldn't. The restaurants were closed. Everything was closed. And so we certainly ended up dumping a lot of beer. We served beer over the bar to go during that shutdown. That was older than we'd like to see it. Yeah. I think that everybody probably would say the same thing. And it was kind of one of those things like, what do you do? I think we were lucky that that, like I said, that we kind of had the money to lose at first. And, we dumped the beer when I would taste it constantly and, back to the QC part. And,
right. Especially probably more heavily at that point.
Taste it every morning at 8 a.m., and we would just pull the plug on beers when they weren't right. And
God, dude.
we just ate it. And, it's funny, this last shutdown was, I think, was scared me more than the first one because we didn't have the money to lose anymore. Right. We had kind of leveled out last summer and things were going okay. We weren't making money. We weren't losing money. And then this last shutdown happened and it's like, I'm looking at the bank account. It's like, man, if payroll hits and our rent hits and our utilities hit, this is
done.
There's not a lot left.
No, man. Yeah. There's a lot of breweries who I heard about at least one local to me a week into it. They're like, we're done. They saw the writing on the wall. So at least you were positioned. And it sounds like you just had residual money or you counted on needing more after the purchase and whatever to the buffer, which is very, very smart. Probably all that business school stuff.
I tell you.
Which is a lesson for people too. You think you need money, you double it and you double it again, and maybe you'll get through your first 6 months of operations that way because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's true, man.
Yeah.
And we're in when things opened up in late January, early February, it just went berserk. We have a big patio here at the brewery. We have a stage. We're able to do live music and they lifted the live music ban. And so all of a sudden Saturdays, I became the door guy. We couldn't let any more people in.
Wow.
And we had a February and a March where I'm like, this is crazy. This is twice what I thought we'd ever be able to do here. And all of a sudden, I'm buying new forklifts and
you're flush
for new brew houses.
Yeah, dude.
So it's been a wild ride. That is for sure.
That's cool, man. That's cool. All right. Well, I opened the 2-hop series.
Yeah, I'm gonna get into that one too.
Are you still down? And who is this handsome young lad on the?
So that's Bo. Bo is a good friend of mine. He brewed. So he brewed at Firestone's Barrel Works. He was their kind of lead brewer at Barrel Works for about 5 or 6 years.
Oh wow.
And for me, coming from Firestone, that was, it was important that we spoke the same language. And so, we talk about things the same way. We CIP tanks the same way. I didn't have to train him on the way I did it, right? Because our training was the same.
Right.
And he really, working with barrels for so long, he really wanted to come and make clean beer. And Bo is just one of my favorite people. And so, the opportunity to put him on a label is pretty awesome. And
yeah.
And I'm gonna throw a little shout out to Monica, who's our sales and operations manager. She kind of does everything around here. She's HR, she does payroll, she does sales. She's like I said, our ops manager, but she also designs a lot of the labels that we do. And so this is one of her handiworks. This beer is rad too. It's Citra Mosaic, really simple malt bill, 2-row carafoam, Chico yeast, and we did use a little bit of incognito in this beer.
What's that?
It's a new hop product from Haas, and it's essentially like liquid lupulin, right? Like
okay.
So they've basically separated out the plant material, and it's not like a hop extract. They don't, and I don't know enough about the process really to talk about how separation has occurred, but I can tell you that it looks like honey. Like it's just this like,
oh, weird. Like this viscous like thing. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I think it was other half had started with the like high density hop charging, where they were basically taking some of their beers that they make and they were just kind of layering this stuff on top of it. And you certainly get bitterness from it. But we started playing around with it a little bit ago. So this is the third beer we've used it on. But it does add this kind of, something in the mouthfeel. There's a kind of a resiny character that comes from it. But it's a pretty cool deal.
Man, the hop game has changed so much. I mean, I remember when hop extracts hit, like the CO2 extraction from, I think, Hop Union at the time. And when I was working on more beer, and that was just, I spent an entire day walking around the entire warehouse going, here, dude, just take your finger and just put it on your tongue. Just try this. And like, you could see like, it was like a living explanation or a living example of the Warheads label. People's head just fucking explode. And then now you get resin.
Yeah, we'd use that CO2 extract in some beers at Firestone, and if you got it on your hands and then went to eat lunch, I mean, you'd taste it. That stuff was intense.
I always thought it would be really cool and a money saver to go to just some bar and you get a PBR and you just get like 2 drops of that and you have a really nice pale ale or whatever, right?
I don't know if it works like that, Chip.
No, I don't think it does.
No.
But you could do it.
Yeah.
You could try it.
So yeah, I'm interested to get your thoughts on this though. This is, I think, more on the dry side. It's a little leaner than the Liquid Gravity, but it does have that kind of resiny hop character that drives through as well.
You want my thoughts on this?
Yeah, I do.
Well, here, let me pour it again. Now, coming from a self-appointed IPA denier, I think it smells good. I think definitely there's that resin, almost diesel thing going on the back end of the aroma, which is West Coast appropriate for sure. The malt, little bit of honey, but not in like a oxidized way. I definitely get like a rounder sort of mouth feel. I want to say creamy, but it's not really creamy. It's smooth, I guess. The bitterness is there. It's firm. It's a little sweet, sweet bitterness, which is a new thing. Apparently I invented this today because I don't think I've ever said this as many times, but sweet bitterness is a thing now.
And I'm with you. I think that's one of the things when I talk about the brew house here, that that's what it contributes. And so, when I tell people where these beers finish, like they finish we keep drying them out more and drying them out more. And like I said, I don't think it's a negative contribution to the beer, but you could see where if I pulled the dextrose out of this beer and, built the recipe as a normal West Coast IPA recipe, that character could be, too much in it.
Yeah. I really do want you to try a Brute IPA on this. Keep in mind, I think the style was stupid and I'm glad it's gone. And I never had a good one. I had ones where I could understand, but I never had a good one. But I think it sounds like your system can contribute these little these little notes that can maybe elevate it a little bit into something different.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, that beer is the older of the bunch. That one's coming up on 3 weeks old now.
Oh, how dare you send me over 3 weeks? Come on.
If you work in a brewery, at least for me, I'm constantly kind of jumping to, the next beer. And so as soon as a beer gets past maybe that kind of 2 week, 3 week mark on a West Coast IPA, I'm jumping on to the next one.
I got a question in the chat. What are you doing to get your West Coast IPAs to finish that dry at less than 2 Plato with USO 5?
Get enough oxygen in there. We mash everything at all these West Coast beers. We mash at 148, and so that lower mash temp, and then we'll just add dextrose. And so this beer that we're drinking, I think, let me check here. Shuffle. I think it's about 5% of dextrose, and so I don't know. In this, in our brewery, that yeast just goes crazy. And we're doing about 4 liters per minute of oxygen, mashing at 148 and 75 pounds of dextrose, and that yeast just chews, man. It chews through it.
All right. Speaking of Bo, Corey's in the chat. And he says, Bo is more interesting. We should interview him.
That's true. Bo also probably has no interest in coming up and doing this. So.
Yeah, probably not, man. I imagine barrel rats are just sort of like, I don't know, man. I just want to do this thing. He also says, why do people still make West Coast IPAs? 0 people drink them, which I agree. I think that about the entire...
yeah, it's dead, right? It's
category,
dead. Nobody wants them anymore. They're
dead.
No
one cares, man. Did I answer your question? Am I off the spotlight? I'm going to move on to the Miami Heist, which looks an awful lot like Grand Theft Auto 5, The Ballad of Gay Tony, which was a great download pack, by the way. If you guys, or maybe it was Grand Theft Auto 3. Yeah, it was 3. The Ballad of Gay Tony ruled. Yeah, of course there was a 3. Well,
I feel like they skipped 3 and went to 4.
No, 3 was cool. I think it was like the Russian dude or whatever. But after that, they had a DLC pack, which was the Ballad of Gay Tony, I think. I know that was the name, but I forget the number. Anyway, super, super cool. If you love the Grand Theft Auto series, the Ballad of Gay Tony ruled. It was it was a lot of fun. Hazy. This is the last one I have from you. And we'll sort of wrap it up here, but hazy beers. How are your hazies selling? Is the Central Coast a hazy hub, or I
would not call it a hazy hub.
All right, good. I can still go there then.
Yeah, it's one of those beers where it's still if you're a hazy guy though, you don't drink anything else, and so we do have a ton of customers that come in that drink our hazy IPAs, and I constantly try to go, hey, we'll try this. And they don't want anything else a lot of the time. And I do also see people burn out on them after drinking them for a year or 2 or whatever. They'll kind of, they'll come back and they'll try to start finding other beers. But, I'll
try, but
I don't drink a ton of them anymore. When I first started making them, I was pretty early on the train making them. When a lot of brewers were kind of standing on on the mountain yelling about how terrible they were. I was really interested in this new canvas for hops, and it was coming on this sort of really soft base with wheat and oats with these higher protein malts and this lower bitterness and this calcium chloride to make them kind of softer and sweeter, and this early dry hop with the biotransformation and this expressive yeast. And, it was really interesting to me, and I drank them for a long time, and I spent a lot of time trying to really narrow down what I liked about them and what I wanted ours to be. But after a while drinking them, I just kind of, they're just full, and they're kind of, if I'm going to sit down and have 2 or 3 or 4 beers, it weighs a little heavier on you. And, as I get older, I drink probably more Pilsners than anything.
Yes. Maybe that's my problem. Maybe that's why I'm such a penis face about most beers. I've always been an old man.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it is. But I still, I take a lot of pride in the ones we make, and I want to make sure that they're that the people who drink a lot of these still enjoy them. The one that we're drinking right now it's a big Citra bomb. We do layer a little bit of Centennial in on the hot side, but it's 100% Citra in the dry hop. We use London 3. It's a blend of two-row and torrefied wheat and oats, calcium chloride, about 1,000 grams in the mash, and mash it a little higher on this one. We go 153. If they stop, this one finishes at about 4 Plato, and as opposed to the West Coast beers that finish at 1.
Yeah.
It's silky and it's sweet, and it's got a lot of like tropical and citrus stuff going on. It's a really good beer.
But you don't like drinking them.
I wouldn't even say that I don't like it. I can't have too much of them. And when I'm drinking,
that's not what you told me before the show. You said, I don't like drinking these. And I told you specifically, I'm going to talk about it because I am happy that there's other people out there. And I know that they exist. We've talked about them before, but I'm always fascinated with brewers who make the thing that they don't like to drink. And I understand that that's the sort of industry we're in now, but think back 15 years, that was not the case. Everybody was like dying on the hill of, I brew the beers I want to drink, and that is fucking it. And if you want something that I don't make, get the fuck out.
Yeah. I mean, I still, part of me like remembers liking them. So
okay, all right. That's fair.
I do. I even tasting it now, I'm like, God, this is nice. But did you like it from a flavor standpoint, or did you like it from a how do I do this standpoint, like a MacGyver standpoint? I think initially, so when I first was exposed to them, I had a lot of really bad ones. Yeah. And everybody's like, it's like, oh, it's
same
APA.
Dude. Yeah.
And they were all garbage. And everything I had, and I'm like, I don't get it, And at some point, I had a beer by Treehouse. It was called Treehouse. It was called Bright, and it was 100% mosaic. And at least the one I had wasn't crazy turbid. It had, you could sort of see through it. You could see light through it, anyways. And it was beautiful. It was like, it was soft. It was tropical. It was citrusy. It had all of the things that you read about them that I hadn't experienced yet because, I had a lot of bad ones. Yeah. So in that moment, that was where I kind of said, okay, I get it. Right. And from there, the MacGyver thing kicked in where I wanted to figure it out. Yeah. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure it out and drank a lot of them along the way. And, really did like them. And so when I told you I didn't like them before,
that was in confidence.
And
you rolled over and made me breakfast, and I said, "Don't talk about that."
Yeah. Now you're dishing out our pillow talk. But I don't drink a lot of them anymore, but I certainly remember, the things that I loved about them when I found them, and I think that they are a great introduction to hops and into IPAs to people who don't like bitterness, right? Because that's
true. First of all, if Pillow Talk isn't a fucking hazy IPA name already, it needs to be. But you know what? I think you're right, and I'm sort of like changing my stance on them. Not that I like them by any means or think that they're good for the industry. Well, that's not true. They are, clearly, because they bring money to craft beer, and that's what's good. But it is a good hop introduction. It's hard because if you come into drinking beer from hazy IPAs, where do you go from that? You know what I mean? If you come in and you approach this beer as, I've never had a craft beer for my entire life, here's this thing, and it's pillowy and it's soft and it's round and it's expressive for the hops, for like the citrus quality of the hops or whatever. Everything else, I would imagine, is sort of a step down because everything sort of has this kind of grinding edge of like even lagers. Even like a Munich Dunkel, even a whatever. It's sort of like the carbonation is higher. It's just a little bit different.
Well, first you go into smoothie salad. Right?
Okay,
that's
right.
The next move. But I mean, really, I think the next move is to find a West Coast IPA producer that really, really, really like understands that flavor forward, aroma forward, low bitterness approach to West Coast IPA.
Okay,
and you can certainly find them. So a lot of the beers that we make, will be in that range as well. But I think if you take someone who has been introduced to, IPAs through the Hazy IPA channel, and they love them, they love that they're not bitter, they're, aromatic, they have all this tropical fruit and all the stone fruit and citrus that's going on. You can find West Coast IPAs that are really low in bitterness, that have a lot of those same hop characteristics, as the hazies do. And to me, that's they don't even know that exists, because they had IPA 10 years ago, and it was clear, and it was right. it was mashed with hop water, and
yep.
it was just loaded
bitter
up on
shit. Yeah,
in
dude.
The bitterness arms race.
Yeah,
and that's why they think they don't like West Coast clear IPAs. But
yeah,
if you go have some of these guys that are making some of the best modern West Coast IPAs around, I mean, I think they're certainly every bit as drinkable and approachable as hazy IPAs. And I think people who just aren't used to getting that in a clear beer would be surprised.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very interesting, and I believe, and maybe you've twisted my arm enough to think that I perceive that common thread through your beers, which is that internal calandria, because it does taste a little different. And I know anybody who's keeping track, which is literally nobody, of what I say about hazy beers, everyone, I always go, oh man, I think I can taste the difference. And I can, and that's, I don't know if it's the psychology of tasting things to describe them or not. But for me, I feel like there is almost a caramelized, darker flavor in the beer that would set this apart.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I guess I'm even more curious than ever about trying to recreate other styles that don't really exist or whatever, because that is your spin. I kind of don't want you to fix your calandria. Because, I guess that's a really good question, because, and then we'll sort of wrap things up. You're looking to get a new system. How are you going to approach the different flavors? I mean, you're going to adjust the recipes to match what your new calandria does, or are you going to get a calandria, or how do you go? Because we've talked so much about the flavor impact of this quote unquote broken machine, for lack of a more interesting term. What do you do when you have one that works?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so to me, I just want to make the best beer that I can. And if whatever I'm getting off the calandria, and I guess this is where, we get back to the point where you said, brewers used to just make what they wanted, and they wouldn't make styles that they didn't want. And now, it's kind of changed. But I still, even if I make a style I don't want, I want it to be the best version of that I can make. And
yeah.
And so regardless of what style it is, I want whatever style of beer that is, I want it to taste as good to me as it possibly can. And so I'm going to navigate it using the equipment that I have to get it to taste as close as I can get it to the way I want it. And so, I'm not necessarily going to take the flavor that we're getting off of our current brew house and try to recreate it with our new one. I'm just going to taste the beer and, put the recipe together the best that I can based on what I think I'll get, taste it, and then try to make it as good as I can possibly make it. And then just continue trying to do that. But I agree with you. I think that it adds something really interesting. And, if I ever miss it, I'm probably going to throw this thing in the dumpster outside. And so maybe I'll cut the calandria out and I'll save it, and I can add it to the new brew house if I really want to.
I mean, it does add an interesting characteristic for sure. And maybe it's, again, because you're pointing it out or whatever, but, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Could you recreate it with a malt? I don't know. But yeah, this beer isn't bad. I'll be honest with you. 8%. I think 8% is too high for me personally. I think this should be 7.5. But
I'll send that to our marketing department.
Yeah, please do. But it's I can definitely see, and like I said, I think that little sort of you think in colors. I can think in colors too a little bit sometimes too. Like when I taste, the way I describe is bizarre, but like it's like the canvas of the color of the beer, and then there's like a dark spot. And like that's the darker flavors that I get that I'm attributing to the Calandria, which to me also sets it apart from some of the other beers that I've had, because everyone's trying to go for these really light, puffy cloud, nug sort of things, right? But this approaches that, but there's like a darker horizon somewhere. And that's that thing that maybe you can't recreate. I don't know. I'm interested to try this beer on a new system and see how you go for it and learn how you process it. Because to me, that's very interesting. People upgrade their shit all the time, but to me, it's a wrinkle that you need to solve that's providing you a benefit also. So how do you approach that? It's interesting stuff.
You cut it out of this one and you put it in the storage container, and if push comes to shove,
right,
you just weld it in the next one too.
Yeah, it's the end of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, but how it should have ended is the next one should have showed Indy pulling the crate back out. That's you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, Brendan, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate you coming in. I appreciate you not coming in, but I appreciate you sending beers. And when everything opens up or whatever, we'd love to obviously get you back in and have a show in the studio and put your beers on tap. And assuming this is ever going to happen. I mean, who knows? We're sort of like perpetually locked down. But everyone, get vaccinated. Don't give me the shit that it's untested. Just shut up about it. Just do it so I can hug you. That's all I want to do. I want to hug every person listening right now. And that's just who I am. Go to liquidgravitybrewing.com. Learn all about what's going on over there. If you're in the Central Coast, go visit them. San Luis Obispo, it's a cool place to be. And Liquid Gravity is the place that you're going to be thirsty for. So check it out. Brendan, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
You got it, bud. Thank you.
All right. Everybody, if you want to have more great beer radio like this, there's Dr. Homebrew. If you're a home brewer and you want to submit your beers into the show, go, email Brian at thebrewingnetwork.com, and he will get you all set up, and we'll need you on the show. And we can taste your beers and give you quality feedback, way better than the feedback I ever gave Brendan, because I'm not a grandmaster BJCP judge like the two Brians are. So anyway, all sorts of stuff going on over on the Brewing Network. So check them out. Check us out. Check everybody out. Check out your neighbors. Stare at your neighbors. Get buy binoculars. Stare at your neighbors 24/7. Take some Adderall. Definitely do some cocaine and watch your neighbors over the course of 3 days. See how they change. Are they pod people? We don't know. Anyway, thanks a lot, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you.
JP's an asshole. Justin's a nice guy and winning the race. JP does great as his charity.